Hello everyone, I hope you're having a great day today, and in this video we're going to be talking about the newest Indiana Jones film, Dial of Destiny. Now, prior to the film's release, a lot of people were really thinking this was either going to be a hit or miss, but me personally, I just thought it was going to be kind of mediocre. After seeing the film, though, there are more flaws than I was thinking there would be. And out of all 5 Indiana Jones films, this just felt the least like one. It just had a completely different vibe. And part of that is because this is the first one to be distributed by Disney, and it also has a new director. So just like the way the film is shot, the action sequences are really flashy and just different from the original. And honestly, the first 3 or I guess even 4 films, they could be kind of goofy sometimes in the action sequences, if we're being completely honest. But I did like that. That was part of the charm, and there was also just more tension in them. But really, the main appeal of the original trilogy was just how everything was done using stunt doubles and practical effects. If we're just talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, the opening sequence when the giant stone is rolling down, that was a real giant stone. It was actually too big and heavy for people to even move by themselves, so in between shots they would have to have these giant sticks to stop it. Most, if not all, of the shots were actually Harrison Ford himself, not a stunt double, as you can just see close up. The truck sequence as well was just really well done, especially the shot where he's just being dragged behind it, and the stunt doubles were just really good at their job, and it was actually pretty risky. And then in Temple of Doom, the minecart chase was also really well done. Obviously they were in minecarts. They also used a miniature model in some shots. They also had a ton of water that they actually splashed because they couldn't use a miniature model of that. I actually just learned very recently, because you would have been able to tell by how big the splash is. And then even when the bad guys fall off the bridge, that looks real because they actually made like these dummies and shot it from far away. In The Last Crusade, obviously the most impressive sequence was probably the one with the tank, which I believe was a real tank too, and so there was just so much more tension in those. Even in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, obviously it was criticized for the CGI because obviously it was 2008, it was not very good, but it still had practical effects in it. This movie, I feel like they just went a little bit too far with the CGI. And if you stick around for the credits, you'll notice there are so many different VFX artists that worked on the movie. It's just a completely different style of action that's pretty generic. The only thing that really felt like classic Indiana Jones to me was when he was on the horse, and obviously there was a train, there was a parade, and all that stuff. And of course you could argue, well, Harrison Ford is 80 years old. There's not that much stuff that you can really do with an 80-year-old man. Sure, but fun fact, in the making of Temple of Doom, Harrison Ford actually got injured and they had to use his stunt double for 5 weeks. And then when he came back, they just did some more close-up shots. That's something that I never even noticed. But with this new movie, the opening scene is pretty good. It's kind of impressive what they were able to do by digitally de-aging him. It's definitely not perfect. You could definitely tell at some spots it just looked a little bit weird, and I don't know why they didn't do anything to make his voice sound younger. When they get better at doing this stuff, it's probably going to look outdated, and I don't know if that'll be like 5-10 years or whatever. For what it is, I think it's good enough, but for some reason it kind of just reminded me of the Polar Express motion capture people. Still though, even this younger version of Indiana Jones in this scene, it didn't really feel like the classic Indiana Jones. Even though it's from that time period, it just had a different vibe, and the action sequences were just shot way different. Now, I do like what they did with Indiana Jones' character arc of him kind of being depressed. Some people compared it to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. I think this was definitely done better than that was. I think that's definitely the best idea for an older version of this character. I didn't really find any of the new characters interesting, especially like Helena, his goddaughter, was just not very charming. And one of my problems with this movie is it can't really decide if it just wants to be another adventure or if it wants to be the final chapter of Indiana Jones. And that's something that the franchise as a whole has kind of struggled with when they did the 4th and 5th movie. Because the original trilogy, you don't really have to watch in order. They're all kind of just separate adventures with their own identity. And Kingdom of the Crystal Skull actually did a pretty good job at connecting the movies. Like you even see Area 51 and the Ark of the Covenant, which that shot I did not really like what they did there. But even in that movie, Marcus Brody was mentioned, and there was a picture of his dad that he reflected on. And of course, Marion from the first movie, he ended up marrying at the end. It's not a good movie, but in terms of connecting it to the other movies, it did a good job at that. This movie, I mean, Solo was in it, and they mentioned his son who apparently died. and of course Marion was in it. But all the new villains, the conflict, the new characters, they were all introduced in this movie, so you just don't really get the same connection. And then I'm not a huge fan of what they did with the time travel. They could have done anything with that, and they only used it once at the very end. Unlike the original 3 movies where they just had really satisfying endings, you never even questioned like what if anything else happened. If you stop and think about all the possibilities, they could have traveled the previous Indiana Jones movies. They actually could have traveled to the year that the villain wanted to and seen the alternate reality. Why is it that Back to the Future Part 2 is the only one that knows how to handle the dark multiverse? I mean, why did he even mention that he wished he could go back in time to save his son, other than the fact of just letting us know what happened to him? I would have settled for like an epic movie where they did all this time travel. I also would have settled for a movie that was not very large in scale and it was more personal, just about him having one last adventure. But when they try to go in between, it just doesn't work. This is a movie that I enjoyed, but it obviously should have been better than it was. So overall, on the quality scale of 0 to 100, I will give it a 66%. And if you're a fan of Indiana Jones, you should definitely check this one out if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. And so just like the way the film is shot, the action